Hey everyone, welcome to my commentary track that is part review of the 2019 Lion King and commentary of the 1994 Lion King. I have so many thoughts about the 2019 remake of The Lion King that I thought the best way to go about it was to do a commentary over the 1994 track because it's so similar that I might as well do a play-by-play about what I liked and what I didn't like, because there was a lot that I liked, but a lot that I really didn't like. So we're going to do this in the riff tracks way, if any of you are familiar with riff tracks. For those of you who are not familiar with it, I'm going to tell you to pause this video in just a moment and on another screen pull up The Lion King. This is going to have to be the original theatrical cut without the morning report scene, so please make sure you have that original cut. And since the opening logo varies, what's going to happen is when the sun rises and you hear that iconic voice singing the song at the beginning, at that moment that it fades in on that, I'm going to have you hit play again. So, if everyone's ready, we're going to go ahead and start this. 1, 2, 3, pause. Alright, we are back. By the way, I'm going to be chiming in with a little line of dialogue here and there, and just at the same time that the characters say it, just to help make sure everybody's on track and synced up with what I'm watching. I didn't want to have any audio from The Lion King itself on this track for copyright reasons. Anyway, let's start with the fact that in the remake, this scene is basically recreated shot for shot. That is not necessarily a complaint. In a way, I see it as an acknowledgement of what this movie is. In 2016, when this movie was announced, nobody had actually asked for a remake of The Lion King. However, since we were getting one, it seemed like they hired the one person who could do it right. The director who had just made the vastly successful and superior to the original Jungle Book remake, Jon Favreau. I did not like the original Jungle Book. I adored the remake. And so, a remake of The Lion King was always going to be a remake of one of the greatest animated movies of all time. And so doing this scene shot for shot is an acknowledgement of that, and definitely shows that Jon Favreau knew what he was getting himself into. He could have made a word-for-word remake, and I think people would have still come to see it and been satisfied. Even this iconic shot, this reveal of Pride Rock with Zazu flying toward it, is iconic. And right after he lands is where we start getting into the problems. We have the bow, and we have some personality from Mufasa here. He gave Zazu a smile that was definitely a friendly smile. He didn't do that in the remake. And then we have Rafiki come through. And in the remake, Mufasa just walks back when Rafiki arrives. He doesn't give him this brotherly hug. I get no sense that he's a friend of the family at all in the remake. Now back to a positive. Baby Simba was very cute, and his movement in his mother's arms was very cute. I would have loved to see a little bit of work with this staff, though. But this part was okay for what it was. Maybe a cute little lion sneeze. Because lions do sneeze, that is realistic. Why not have baby Simba sneeze? And look at that happily married couple. They did not look happy at all in the remake. By the way, the vocalist who did the English lyrics in this song in the remake, did a very good job. They even managed to recreate that moment, this spinning shot, which, quite frankly, is actually probably easier in a computer-animated movie, because you've got a three-dimensional environment in which to move around your camera. Two-dimensional, you've got to recreate that environment at every moment at every different angle. But yeah, overall, this scene was done just fine in the remake, except for the fact that Mufasa did not have a character at all, and didn't seem attached to Zazu or Rafiki. And the little extended bit with this mouse was very cute, and had some very good music to it too, that would have played very well in the background at Disney's Animal Kingdom, over at Disney World. Then we get the reveal of Scar in the remake, who wears the same facial expression in every single scene. See, this Scar smiles. This Scar taunts the mouse and Zazu. But there's a level of sass to this Scar that was not captured, neither by the animators nor by Chiwetel Ejiofor. I heard a review that stated it really well. There are lines that were written with Jeremy Irons in mind that definitely didn't work very well with new actors. John Oliver was excellent casting. Now we get this shot with Mufasa that does a big reveal of him with a big piece of score, and him saying the line he's about to say here. Surabhi and I didn't see you at the presentation of Simba. That line. But we can hardly hear it over the score of that moment. I get adding more score, but this scene didn't even need a score. No disrespect to Hans Zimmer at all. I love that little smirk that Scar has. And I missed it in the remake. I did like the line of, I wouldn't dream of challenging you again. See, this actually makes me feel a little bit bad for Scar. Not a lot, but just enough that he's a semi-relatable villain. And the villains you can relate to, I think, are usually the best. I mean, look at Black Panther, where you can totally agree with his motives, even if you disagree with his actions. I would say the score for the remake is maybe about 10% improved over the original. Most of the time it's beat for beat the same as the original, but that was a great score to begin with. I actually really like listening to the score on my way to and from work occasionally now. I did buy the soundtrack. The way they went about doing the painting of Simba was also pretty cute, but it would have done better if we were already attached to Rafiki like we are now. We know he's a friend of the family. And not just, I don't know, I guess it would be the village priest that they call on to bless the prince or whatever. Again, a scene that was done just fine in the new one, but would have probably done a little better if Simba had had some facial expressions. I mean, watch this face that he makes right after he says, "You promised." Just a cute little angry face. It's like, you want to chew him out, but he's too cute to chew out. Even a little smile from Surabhi would have been nice. This scene was also just fine. But this was where I started to really notice that how much James Earl Jones's voice has aged in the last 25 years. as human voices usually do. Now look at this. We distinctly get a look at the shadowy place where they're not allowed. I've actually seen the Lion King remake. I went to it twice, but the second time I walked away a little early. But in the remake, we don't actually get a sense of where that forbidden area is. And then we do this as like a voiceover with a nature documentary. I thought that was an okay approach just for this. The problem is that too much of the movie became a nature documentary. It was very pretty, and I give very high marks to the animators. But that's about all it is it looks like a nature documentary. So it's like the songs of the Lion King attached to a nature documentary. Do you think I've said nature documentary enough times here? Alright, now if Zazu has broken into song right now, you are watching the wrong version of this movie. Otherwise, we'll keep on going. I think they made the first ever tweeting joke Twitter joke that's actually going to age well. The only thing that's not going to age well in Moana is when you use a bird to write with, it's called tweeting. But here he says, the birds have been tweeting at 4 a.m., we get it, that's fine. Mufasa? Simba? I'm not sure why they didn't have this gopher dude. Maybe they didn't want to animate one more animal on top of the hundreds that were in this movie. And I guess it's okay that they expounded on Simba's feelings about not being able to go along for this little mission. And then in this scene we got to one of Scar's probably better lines in this movie, where he said, well, let's hope we're never attacked by beetles. I think another one of the big problems I had with Scar, besides the fact that he, like everybody else, maintains the same facial expression through the whole movie, is that it's in the casting. I think Chiwetel Ejiofor is great, but the first question they should have asked is, can you sing? And they should have auditioned him for the greatest villain song of all time. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll get to Be Prepared later, because I do have a lot to say about that. I never considered this my favorite of the Disney animation quadrifecta of perfection, which was The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. But after seeing the remake, I definitely feel like it was like I underappreciated it over the last 25 years against those other movies. By the way, if I had to rank the Disney remakes that have been made so far, Jungle Book may not be the best, but it's the best improvement over its original. Beauty and the Beast was very good. Cinderella was also very good, and it was nice to see a traditional Cinderella story in a time where they're trying to change up everything, especially after Maleficent. Again, Maleficent is fine, but it was nice to see a traditional Cinderella when that remake came out. The other thought I had recently is that Thor and The Lion King have very similar plots, and maybe they should have gotten Kenneth Branagh to do this, especially considering that he did the Cinderella remake. He's already dipped his toe in these waters. But Jon Favreau worked so well with CGI animals in the Jungle Book remake that until I saw the remake last week, I thought he was the perfect choice for this remake. Now, the song that's about to come up is definitely a point where film, we can see the disadvantages of what they attempted with the Lion King remake. And that's the fact that this movie took full advantage, this 1994 original took full advantage of the fact that it was a cartoon. And there's a lot of cartoonish stuff that totally works in this movie, especially in this song coming up. There were a few shots in the remake that I thought were really good, like when he's running through the giraffes' necks as they rise up in sequence as he runs along. Also, the girl who played Nala, who was also the daughter in Jordan Peele's Us, was phenomenal, both in Us and in this. I think she actually outshone Simba a little bit in the parts that she sang. And I'm glad they gave her a few lines of this to sing. Now, and I heard this song on the soundtrack. I actually didn't have any complaints about the fact that John Oliver hardly does any singing. He has one line that he sings. But yeah, John Oliver was excellent casting for Zazu. Now this, making funny faces at Zazu, maybe it's a little cartoonish, but that's part of the charm of this movie. And that's part of what I would have loved to see in the remake. Now changing these backgrounds the way they are, I get it. That would have been already extremely complicated on top of everything they've already set out to do. This child is getting wildly out of wing. Just that one line that John Oliver actually sang. See, that's funny. All the zebras turning their butts to Zazu. You gotta hand it to Zazu, though. He puts up with a lot, and he still stays loyal. Now, if they had really wanted to go for the realism, he would have quit his job and quit his position in the kingdom after all of this. Especially if he had been treated the way he was here. But they did get a little bit of that, and I think they would have gotten enough that would have been fair in the remake. But yeah, this pyramid of animals, they could have done something, I don't know, like maybe have all the animals run along after them, smallest to biggest. And definitely have all the animals singing along with Simba would have been a plus. It was one of the things I really loved in Beauty and the Beast, especially during the song Beauty and the Beast in the remake. There's a part where the wall decorations that look like musical instruments actually play part of the accompaniment. They got into this wrestling a little slowly, and they drew that out a little too much in the remake. Now this place is so cool here. And they got a little bit of what made it cool in the remake. Like all the bones laying around. That was great. But it would have also been nice with the fact that this area is in the shadows. Like it is a naturally shadowy place. I liked that Nala was a little bit more concerned with Simba's guts in this scene. Look how nervous Zazu looks. I didn't feel that at all in the remake, that he was nervous about being here. And that's going to be a recurring theme of what we're talking about here. I'm okay with the idea that we had a lot more hyenas. I'm okay with the idea that Shenzi was like the leader, the one whose name everybody knows. And even Key and Eric Andre did a good job having like a comedic duo between them. Which it almost seems like I would not be surprised to learn they tried to get Jordan Peele for the other hyena that he plays off of. They keep the laws of this land very simple and succinct here. I love that Whoopi Goldberg has some attitude. Like it's her brand that plays through in her character. And the Shenzi in the remake was way too serious. The score in this scene was pretty cool. And they did a good job playing it like a little bit of a horror movie. And there's some more of Simba being sassy to them. I feel like nobody was sassy in the remake. Except maybe Timon and Pumbaa. Another thing we'll get to later. And what's worse, you put Nala in danger. Which he really did. He had to go back and try to rescue Nala. And he did a good job of it, too. But they were both pretty useless in this whole thing in the remake. Another thing that was just fine, the Mufasa roar dubbed over, or overpowering Simba's roar. Even like little unspoken exchanges like Zazu and Mufasa had right there. They work really well because they both have characters that are invisible emotions. I like that Zazu tried to say, "Don't be too harsh." I've got to teach my son a lesson. I feel like this scene the night progressed way too fast. Like this is right at dusk. There's stars visible, which is relevant in a minute. But in the remake, this is still in broad daylight when he steps in his dad's paw print here. And he doesn't look like guilty at all when he's approaching his dad. James Earl Jones gave that line with like no emotion in the remake. But this is such an important father and son moment. Like such an important teaching moment for Simba. but they both just look like lions. They don't look like they're sharing any emotions between each other at all. And look how playful Mufasa looks here. It makes you really care about him, which makes what happens later so devastating. I just don't get how the studio and director that made Jungle Book, which had excellent animal emotions, made this Lion King remake, which is so emotionally heavy, with no emotions from any of their characters, no visible emotion at all. Alright, I'm going to start my rant on Be Prepared right now, because there is a lot to talk about, but not the least of which is how butchered the final product of the song itself was. Like, they kept just like 2 lines besides the words "Be prepared." Maybe 4 lines, but they kept so little of the original song. And what they had at the beginning of the song would have been a good intro. Like, on the soundtrack to the original, he goes into this, or Scar goes into this thing, he says, "I never thought hyenas essential. They're cruel and unspeakably plain. But maybe they've a glimmer of potential if allied to my vision and brain." And then it goes do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-dum. And that shows how good I am at beatboxing. And so, when he started saying new words that rhymed, I thought that was going to be an intro into arguably the greatest Disney villain song of all time. Where he goes, in the 2019 version, he goes, "Mufasa's yesterday's message, a clapped-out, distracted regime, whose failings undoubtedly presage the need for a different dream. Yes, leonine times are changing, which means that hyenas must too. My vision is clear and wide-ranging, and even encompasses you." And then, right from that line, jump right into, and I did that a little early here, but that's okay. But then go like, "and even encompasses you." It's like when you've got one of the greatest villain songs ever done on hand and ready for you to make, why would you cut it the way you did? And what I read during the production of this movie is that they decided to cut this song altogether. And it had to do with the fact that there is some Nazi imagery later, like some imagery that definitely resembles Nazi Germany. And that is intentional. And if I had to guess, it has to do with the fact that, and I'm going to get a little political here, but it used to be politically correct to say that Nazism is wrong. And if they were really scared about offending people who actually believe in Nazi tenets, as seems to be a problem right now, they should have just cut the song altogether like they said they were going to do. Take, for example, right now, in July of 2019, there's a Joker movie coming out with Joaquin Phoenix in October, I believe. What we know about that song, or about that movie right now, based on what the director has said, is that it is not based on any Joker comics, or any comics that have been established at all, and that it's going to be rated R. Knowing these things now is definitely good to save on potential disappointment later. But listen to this song. This is such a great villain song. "For the king who'll be all time adored. Ba-da-da-da-da." We definitely have to give so much credit to Jeremy Irons here. Like how much of his soul he put into this song. He sounds so evil and it's so great. New Scar sounded psycho. And we got to give Jeremy Irons credit, especially because right there he blew out his voice, and from here on it's Jim Cummings singing, and he does so good. We'll have food, lots of food, we repeat, we'll have food. I'm glad they did something with the moon in this shot. But they did nothing to earn that shot. Like, they did a version of this shot, and it was okay. But they did nothing to earn it. It definitely feels earned right here. Ooh, they definitely should have had some greenery over the walls of this gorge. Because it was in the middle of a desert. And it makes sense for there to be living trees popping up here and there inside this gorge. The idea of finding your roar, though, that's fine. It gives Simba a good reason to stay where he is, based on a trusted relative's BS that he's giving him. Here he's being a little too vague, but in the remake he's giving him a reason to stay there. Man, I maybe I noticed it before, but I've never really taken note of it. But just how much Scar smiles in this movie. And it's a very good evil smile. Again, the advantages of this being a cartoon. And how great and how cartoonish it is, how that elevates this movie. The idea that a hyena's belly is never full was a cool addition. Now they showed the hyenas chasing these wildebeests here for something that was pretty good. Oh yeah, the chameleon, another nature documentary moment. Where he ate that dragonfly or whatever it was. Now this is cool. That was they could have even put like a little puddle there and made a Jurassic Park reference, and it would have been totally. It wouldn't have even felt like an Easter egg. It would have felt ominous. The exact same Jurassic Park Easter egg that they put in the Aladdin remake, actually. I don't know what it is, but the stampede chasing Simba down feels so, like, it feels so much more dangerous here than it did in the remake. And again, Mufasa had the exact same expression from while he was there with Zazu to the moment that he said Simba. The score is very good here, and it was excellent in the remake, but it was a little too quiet against what else was going on. Like, I will crank this music in the car. But it was way too far in the background in the remake. On one hand, Scar smacking Zazu right there is well within his character and would have worked in the remake. On the other hand, you have to wonder why Zazu ever trusted Scar after that, and why he ever served him. And look at that, the shot just now of Scar, like, looking down. He was in a shadow, and it was so ominous and excellent. And how worried Simba looks here, as he should. Like, people who knew what was coming in the remake, based on having seen this, should have been dreading what was about to happen. But because of the fact that that Mufasa did not look scared at all, personally, I didn't feel bad for him when this all happened. Oh, and this pause right after this line. And that close-up of the betrayal and the horror in Mufasa's face. All that emotion conveyed in a drawing. You'd think they could do a little bit of that with computers. I don't think there was enough lingering dust in this scene. The dust here has obscured... There's so much dust in the air, it's obscured the sunlight a little bit. And it makes this... It just puts a literal cloud over this scene that is so effective. And just watch Simba's face in this scene. It is hard to watch him slowly realize what has happened here. Because we've established, besides the fact that he's saying, "I just can't wait to be king," we've established that he and his father were very close. And they both wanted the best for each other. Now, I actually had to look it up and see if lions actually cry. And it said that humans are the only ones that actually shed tears, even though most other animals have tear ducts. If I were directing the Lion King remake, I would have absolutely made Simba shed some tears here. As he does here in the original right now. Instead of just expressionless curl up to his dead father's body. Oh, he did that here too. But it works. Because of everything that's been built up. I don't see a drawing here of a dead lion. I see a dead character and his son in mourning. This was a scene where J.D. McCrary, the actor playing young Simba, did a very good job. But his face did not match what the actor was doing. I'll actually give high praise to J.D. McCrary for his entire performance as young Simba. He was very good. The way they went about this chase was also pretty good. Definitely a good use of the actors they got behind the other two hyenas, Keegan-Michael Key and Eric Andre. I definitely would have loved to see them play with the sunset a little more here. Huh, makes you realize this part, like from the moment that Scar takes Simba to where he was in the gorge to now, all takes place over the course of a day. I guess it was probably later in the day when he took him to the gorge. Whatever. But the remake did not play enough with the time of day lighting like this movie does. I did like the extended version of this speech, like how he emphasizes his BS love for Mufasa before even mentioning Simba. Another one of the things they did better, and I feel like this was a very good addition, is there's a hunting scene in the new one that shows Scar hunting with the hyenas, and exactly how they together caused the famine. Going back a little bit, seeing the hyenas chasing away that herd of wildebeest, they did exactly that to what they were hunting. And I thought that was effective in showing, a little more effective in showing what was at stake. And Rafiki looked heartbroken right there, which he did not in the remake. That seems to be a theme here. Oh, this scene that started with a Monty Python reference in the new one, that was very creative and a very good way to introduce Timon and Pumbaa. And the casting of Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen as Timon and Pumbaa was excellent. But again, it would have been more effective if either of them had had facial expressions, which theoretically should be easier with Timon than anybody else. I just think this movie depended way too much on the performances of the voice actors for us to care about the emotions that they were feeling. I will say, though, Nathan Lane is a national treasure. And we as a collective world should be forming a protective circle around him so that he lives as long as possible. Or as long as he wants, I guess, would be the better way to go about it. I really think the characterizing of Timon and Pumbaa is one of the highlights of the new movie. Like, they somehow made their own version of these iconic characters. Who cares? I can't go back. I really feel the weight of what Simba has been through. And surprise, surprise, I didn't feel that at all when they were about to introduce the concept of Hakuna Matata in the remake. I actually did smile a lot when I listened to this on the soundtrack before seeing the movie. Seth Rogen cannot sing, but it worked. I also laugh when I think about the auditions for the Beauty and the Beast remake, because everybody had to sing this song to audition for that, including Sir Ian McKellen, Emma Thompson, everybody. So picturing Magneto singing Hakuna Matata brings me joy. Oh, another improvement that the remake did over the original, Baby Pumbaa. Baby Pumbaa was so cute. It was definitely a plus over having current Pumbaa in this flashback. He didn't look very ashamed. To what, Brad? And I got downhearted! And hey, a PG rating made it so that they could actually get away with using the word. So no need for, look at this, even Simba's little butt bouncing to the rhythm right there. This movie has, for being such a simplistic and like 2D animated movie, they put so much subtlety in this that totally worked and elevated this movie so far above what it could have been. It's nice to see Princess Carolyn from BoJack Horseman in this scene. And she didn't seem out of place. I like that they didn't get too graphic with showing the bugs getting bitten in half or crunched on or anything. Like, this is more graphic than what they did. Like, Simba ate his first grub in one bite and it wasn't too graphic, and it worked. And that was okay with the realism. What he just ate actually looked a little appetizing. Looked like a gummy worm. This is a shot that was done really well in the remake, showing how he grew 400 pounds since they started the song. And then the reveal of adult Simba when he jumped out of the grass was just fine. Donald Glover, good casting choice. I'm still not sure why Matthew Broderick didn't do his own singing here. Oh no, he's riffing. This is a nightmare. So yeah, highest props to what I assume are the improvisational skills of Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen. They did a great job. And then this gets replaced by the hunting scene and the scene where Scar flirts with Surabhi, which the hunting scene I did like I mentioned earlier. But it would have been nice to see something like this with a little more focus on the suffering that this famine is causing. Oh, you know, it would have fit really well if they had remade this particular scene. Would have been if Zazu had started singing the Tiki Room song from Disneyland. Considering that he and Iago took over the Tiki Room in Florida for several years. By the way, if you want to see a really cool takeover of the Tiki Room, look up the one in Japan where Stitch has taken over it. thank you, Hyenas, for this little bit of exposition. I get the emphasis that they want on more visual storytelling, and I can appreciate that. But there's just an interplay between these characters that seemed very lessened, very reduced in the remake. Like, if Shenzi had been a more comedic character, I would have loved to see more of her. Again, another scene that would have been done really well if the characters in the remake had had any facial expressions. Because what we're about to see is a really great opening of Simba's soul to his friends. And how much it hurts that they make fun of it. Why is it always gas with you? Again, something that really worked. The timing of the way Timon and Pumbaa both laughed was very good. There is a whole episode of Timon and Pumbaa dealing with Timon's love of calling people a mook. It's like they took everything they could from this movie and made episodes about it. There's something I would have done here, but it would have been in reference to something inappropriate. But the thing they did with the tuft of hair was kind of cute, but it was drawn out a little long, and definitely had an unnecessary section with that dung beetle. Yeah, what I would have done was in reference to an Easter egg that was originally meant with that dust to say SFX. But that is not what people read when they noticed it. They definitely read that F as an E. Oh, and here, both in the original and the remake, there's one of my favorite pieces of score. It's this lead-in to the theme music. Sometimes these lead-ins are amazing, and this is definitely one of those cases. Right here. Right? Yeah, right now. Da, da, da. Da, 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 da. And yeah, fun story. The way Rafiki reacted to this revelation is how I reacted when The Force Awakens started. Except there were so many more actual tears. Okay, this is definitely a scene that was vast. This is the most improved scene from the original to the remake. We get this song for a little longer. We get some animals joining in. A few more nature documentary shots. And an excellent scream when they get interrupted. That was also a very good nature documentary moment here while we're watching the original, just to show how a lioness can blend against her surroundings to be an excellent hunter. I don't see any more appropriate reaction to his situation. Now, they both looked like cartoon characters when they were screaming, which again is a definitely to this movie's benefit. And with realistic lion on lion violence, they could have gotten more vicious with each other here. This is a little better than the remake here because it should actually take Nala a moment, because in her mind, Simba's been dead ever since before she became an adult lion. Ever since she was a little cub. Simba's been dead since then, so it was right for her to question who he was, instead of recognizing him immediately. Another one of the big problems I had was the fact that the lionesses all look the same. I mean, kind of so did Mufasa and Simba, but there's a part at the very end where Simba looks back at one of the lionesses, and I have no idea if it's Surabhi or Nala. I liked that Pumbaa approached that at a more joking angle. And we're going to get into something that makes absolutely no sense in a minute in the remake. Says me complaining about a movie about CGI lions and other animals that can sing and dance and talk, but apparently not have emotions. I quote "It Starts" so much in my daily life. Like the first time it snows, or the first day I don't need a jacket in the year. Oh! Oh. Disasters in the air. And look, it's sunset again, with some beautiful lighting, which makes using the word tonight logical. I appreciate that they both did their own singing for this scene. But yeah, here, what we're watching right now, it makes sense to say, "Can you feel the love tonight?" Instead of like, "Can you feel the love this afternoon?" in the broad daylight where this scene takes place in the remake. I'm going to say something that apparently is super blasphemous in the world we live in, but it's my opinion and I'm going to stick with it. Beyonce as a musical artist is overrated. I thought she did just an I thought she did a good job here. She got a little too jazzy for what this movie asked for, but she did it well. And I do not like that Spirit song that got added later. Oh, there seems to be a little more light here. Maybe I'm complaining a little bit too much about the fact that none of Can You Feel the Love Tonight takes place at night. Visit the Honest trailer for this movie for some inappropriate but very pertinent lyrics to this song, especially for the moment that happened just now. And look at these brimming tears that Timon has. But apparently animals can't shed tears, so that would be forbidden from the remake. I just want to give Pumbaa a hug here, but Timon's already there to do it. And yeah, it would have been nice to have them cry a little bit at the end of that. This is actually very... So the second time I watched this, the remake I mean, this is where I actually wanted to get up and leave before remembering that there was one more moment of very good score coming up that would have sounded really good on the speakers in the theater I was in. But this is where I tried to walk out. I couldn't take it anymore. The lack of emotion on screen. I love that. An acknowledgement that Mufasa was a very good king. And what he brought to the kingdom is what they need back. I'm still mixed on the idea that Nala left after this exchange. But here she stuck around because she knew that this was the best thing she could do. I would have loved to see this little song that Rafiki sings instead of like the weird Swahili chanting that he did. Or like the just random lines in Swahili, because people who don't speak Swahili will never know what he was saying there. So apparently we don't actually need to know. And I'm actually only guessing that it was Swahili. It could have been any number of languages he was speaking. But this is nice. He's taking like the Yoda route of going out of his way to annoy Simba a little bit to teach him a lesson. Even though we know there is a massive amount of wisdom behind that face. I think out of all the character designs for the remake, Rafiki was probably the best. But it also would have gone really well with some facial expressions. Wrong. I'm not the one who's confused. You don't even know who you are. Yeah, I love this. It's like, I really feel the same thing as, like, Yoda when... Like, I would definitely put Rafiki right next to Yoda. Here he feels like he broke news to him. The other one, he felt like he was stating the obvious. Either one works, I think. I remember as a child thinking this scene would make a really good workout tape. Didn't feel that in the new one. And here we get to a scene I had a lot of problems with, besides the score. The score was great. But the fact that Mufasa and Simba look so similar and are always wearing the same facial expression, they could have not changed the reflection in the water at all, and I wouldn't have noticed. And that is distinctly Mufasa. I've always loved watching this scene, and it was very disappointing in the new one. This is the scene after which I walked out in the new one. Mufasa's voice echoes in such a great way in this scene. Oh, and having the sun come up during this vision is a great touch. Like, this also felt very reduced in the new one, even though Mufasa had some new stuff to say. There's some emotion in Simba's face while he's chasing after the vision. I guess the sun wasn't coming up, but that was still a very good vision scene. And here we're about to get one of the greatest character moments. It starts with a moment of slapstick comedy in which a very good life lesson is taught, and I would have loved to see that in the new one. There we go. The most recent time I saw that lesson show up on my Facebook feed was today, actually. People still remember that moment and how important it was. We get this scene cut because Nala has already left, and we go into Beyonce's new song, Spirit, which, as I said before, wasn't very good. And yeah, it was while that Spirit song was playing that I actually left the second time. So from here on out, we get stuff I've only seen once, and that was on the opening night of the remake. The second time I watched it was 2 days ago. So I tried to get a more fresh take on everything because it seems like everybody I know liked this movie more than I did. And like I've seen all these glowing things that people are saying about it online, and I'm like, did we watch the same movie? And so I went to it again to see if anything that any of my friends had said would change my opinion. And yeah, I did not make it through all the way through my second viewing. I was actually jealous of the people I met right before that second showing who were going to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because I had already seen it. And that, even though that's about twice as long as what we're watching right now, it's such a better time than the remake of this. Definitely not for children, though. Rated R. Fun fact, one of the last dates I ever went on before my first date with my wife was to the 3D re-release of this movie. And historically, I've said a lot about how much I don't like 3D when it's applied to something that wasn't originally filmed in 3D. But it worked for Lion King, I think because of the simplicity of what was on screen. For live action, especially for complex live action, the only way to get good 3D is to have a camera with two lenses to simulate the depth perception that having two eyes causes. And then in computer animated movies, like the remake of this, 3D works because all you have to do is go into the original files, and where you had your original camera, put a second camera right next to it and re-render that second vision of what everyone's going to see. It doesn't work with movies like Shrek, where a lot of the original files have been lost, but it definitely worked for Toy Story, when 1 and 2 were re-released in 3D before the third one came out. I was disappointed not to have this upcoming song on the soundtrack, but what they ended up doing for this scene, I thought it worked, especially considering that this is another remake. It actually brought the score over from the Beauty and the Beast remake. But this is still way more memorable. And this is what we'll remember more of for this scene in the long term. I thought it did a weird thing to the flow to have essentially this scene moved earlier in the movie. But it did a good job establishing the stakes, that there were the reality of what was at stake with Scar on the throne earlier on. I think in this version, this is the first time we really get to see it firsthand. Excellent reaction to seeing your uncle strike your mother. That was very fitting that probably while she's still in a bit of a daze from that hit, she thinks she sees Mufasa. That's an excellent moment of the power that Simba actually has here. If they really wanted to go to realism, I feel like those hyenas would not still be alive, the ones that failed to kill Simba. And I'm basing that off of absolutely zero actual knowledge of the lifespans of lions and hyenas. Let's get this straight. I thought all of the voice actors in the new remake did a great job. I thought Chiwetel Ejiofor did a great job with what he was given, despite the fact that Be Prepared was cut so significantly. Alfred Woodard as Surabhi was great. Those are actually two people I've seen in person. Side note, Chiwetel Ejiofor and Alfred Woodard. I liked that they still had this spinning shot, but because it was photorealistic CGI, it felt a little bit more, a little bit faster. This is more stuff that was also just drawn out a little too much in the remake. But in their effort to go for realism, I like the way that Simba went about being pulled back up from that spot, like digging his claws into Scar's paw and having him angrily pull him up. So yeah, it might be a little cartoonish, the fact that he just jumped up so easily to tackle Scar here. And the fighting here was done just fine. Although right just now we saw a nice callback to the first shot with Timon and Pumbaa, which would have also been a fun one to see in the remake. I didn't like the idea that Rafiki's staff was something he only pulled out just for this. My thought in that moment was actually, where was that the entire rest of the movie? You have an iconic look when you have that staff. There was another scene that was added a little earlier on. It's the one where Timon and Pumbaa and Simba and all of their friends in that area, they're all breaking down a termite hill for just to eat a whole bunch of termites. That's another scene that I thought was a very good addition, and it didn't even mess with the flow, I thought. But this original flows so well from scene to scene. I feel like in this moment, Simba is having a very Luke Skywalker type struggle. We're talking Return of the Jedi, where he's actually dipping his toe in the pool of evil, or being the evil one, or acting evil. But he's got a much better grip on where he stands right here than Luke Skywalker did in that moment that he raged out on Darth Vader. That line is always, in both versions, is an excellent callback. But definitely in the remake, I didn't like seeing Scar get so much closer to the burning embers, which is something that I feel like is super easy to notice. At least if you've seen this original. If you haven't seen this original, it's probably a shock when he uses the burning embers as a weapon against Simba. I'm glad they brought back the slow motion in this fight. That shot was definitely present in a few nightmares as a child. Nothing too serious, but just there. When I was a lot more prone to nightmares. But it never made me dislike this movie at all. A hyena's belly is never full. That was a clever thing they did in the remake. I've heard the theory that the spirit of Mufasa is essentially in control of the rain based on how he appeared to Simba, which makes Mufasa a bit of a jerk in the afterlife. If he's causing a drought just so Simba can come back, animals have died because of that, and not as prey or anything. Animals have died of dehydration because of it. But that's probably just stretching for a theory. Maybe the rain is just here for convenient movie purposes. This is another line I quote a lot. And so it's one that I would have loved to have included in this movie. Or in the remake, I mean. This score did sound pretty cool, but it would have sounded cool if it was louder in my theaters. On both viewings. I'm not sure how I feel about Simba roaring before the crescendo of the song. Even though he roars on it as well. Like, he starts roaring right about here. And then roar again. Yas. So yeah, that about wraps up my thoughts on the Lion King remake. And I'm amazed I was actually able to keep talking throughout this entire movie. But one last thought, although it was nice to see Timon and Pumbaa and Zazu off on their own corner, which would have made more sense here than what we see right now. You would not be able to unconvince me of the idea that the baby lion that Rafiki holds up for this last shot isn't the same model they used for baby Simba. So to sum up, visible expressions of emotion would have elevated the Lion King remake so much higher than it could have been. And having seen the Jungle Book remake before this, I felt like that was a fair expectation to hold the studio and the director to. But the last thing I'll say before I let you guys go here is the situation that Jon Favreau is currently in. It has to do with the fact that he's extremely busy. Not only did he have to do this, the remake of this movie, he also had to star in Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home. And he's been working on executive producing a brand new series for Disney Plus, which is coming out in November, The Mandalorian. And so I find it hard to blame him too much because of everything he's got on his plate, but at the same time, I feel like he himself set such a high standard, and I would have loved to see that same standard met with the Lion King remake. But if you've been listening, I've definitely had some pluses as well as the minuses to talk about. I'll let you guys go here. Y'all have a good night.